You can have it all. Great pay, awesome benefits, a flexible schedule, the chance to grow. At Cox, we're recruiting auto and diesel technicians to join our Mannheim and Fleet Services teams. If you're ready for a new job and want to experience an award-winning workplace, drive your career forward with us. Visit cox.career/autotech to learn more. That's cox.career/autotech. When you work in tech at Cox, you get to do meaningful work every day. You get to be the biker who codes as fast as he rides, crafting advanced tech solutions that transform car buying, or a guitarist who develops harmonious apps and websites, connecting people to people and businesses, all in real time. A savvy soccer mom running solution sets as passionately as she runs gameplays. Be the super secret keeper, designing cybersecurity systems to protect private data and websites. A planet protector, expanding EV battery life and inventing more ways to build a better future for all. When you work in tech at Cox, you get to do career-defining work that solves the greatest problems of our time. Join us and connect to work that improves lives, including yours. Learn more about our family of businesses at cox.career/tech. You can have it all. Great pay, awesome benefits, a flexible schedule, the chance to grow. At Cox, we're recruiting auto and diesel technicians to join our Mannheim and Fleet Services teams. If you're ready for a new job and want to experience an award-winning workplace, drive your career forward with us. Visit cox.career/autotech to learn more. That's cox.career/autotech.
764-2119. A flooded home is never easy to deal with. You're left with the mess to clean up, the insurance companies to deal with, and not to mention all the memories, the precious memories that are lost in the flood. You can never replace those. An AquaDam can be a tool in your arsenal to protect your home and property from the floodwaters. The cofferdam is filled with water to control water and is reusable as long as it's taken care of. It can protect your home or business from rising floodwaters like a dam, but without the beavers. It can also be used in construction. If you need an area to be dewatered, an AquaDam can do the job. An AquaDam was used at SeaWorld in Orlando for the Mako roller coaster ride during the coaster's construction by dewatering the work area. An AquaDam is now dewatering the work area at San Antonio SeaWorld for their newest roller coaster ride. An AquaDam has been used in many construction projects all around the U.S. and all around the world. Now give AquaDam a call, 707-764-2119. You can look them up online at aquadam.net. You can find them on Facebook at Aquadam Inc. You call them up, you email them, you tell them Ed Opperman sent you, and they're going to take 10% off the price. Aquadam.net, 707-764-2119. If you find yourself in need of legal representation, it can be a very stressful time in your life. In my career, I have dealt with thousands of lawyers, I've dealt with thousands of law firms, and I can confidently recommend to you Keith M. Davidson at kmdlaw.com. Available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Just log into kmdlaw.com. That's kmdlaw.com. Or you can call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. That's 833-4KMD-LAW. Personal injury, wrongful death, STDs, sexual assault, car accidents. They handle it all efficiently and professionally. It doesn't matter how imposing the opposition may be, because the team at kmdlaw.com are battle-tested and fierce. They will not stop until justice prevails. Go to kmdlaw.com or call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. If you're in for the fight of your life, stop screwing around and contact KMD Law.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting through my website, emailrevealer.com. And if you like today's show, you can check out my Patreon. We put up 16 hours of new content on Patreon each month. 8 hours exclusive that you can't find on AM/FM radio. And the other 8 hours is the stuff you can find on AM/FM radio, but without the ads. We cut all the ads out. You listen to it ad-free on Patreon. I got coming up there some good stuff. I just had NT Lawyer from Crazy Days and Nights, who we just put up there. And coming up, I'm putting up the guy who drove, his name is Buell Frazier, who drove Lee Harvey Oswald to the book depository building that day when President Kennedy was shot. And you're going to hear some exclusive, brand new content. He's never done an interview before. You're going to hear some good stuff. As always, our archives are free at Spreaker.com. Go to Spreaker.com, sign up for free. There's a chat room, and you get an email notification anytime we put up new content. If you go to Spreaker.com, I've done a lot of shows about the topic we're going to be talking about today, but our guest today, Mike Williams, is considered today to be one of the deepest researchers into the topic of Paul is Dead, PID for short, or the replacement of Paul McCartney with a double. Okay, it's been going on for years. People have been talking about this. He runs a website called sageofquay.com. You can go there and you can find his YouTube channel, his Twitter channel, and his, I believe there's a Facebook too as well. Mr. Mike Williams, are you there?
I'm here, Ed. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you so much for coming on the show and being at two. We had to switch at the last minute. Mike Williams is not a diva. I can tell the audience this for a fact because we had to switch the time, and he was very kind and considerate, and he helped me out there when I double booked my noon recording time. But tell the audience, besides not being a diva, tell the audience, who is Mike Williams?
Mike Williams, Ed, is just a guy that is 62 years old. I was born and raised on Long Island in New York. And as the years went by, I got into music. I started playing guitar. I was writing original music back in the late 1970s, going into the 80s, 90s, and actually to this day. I was in the corporate world for over 30 years. And then in 2016, I read this very strange book titled The Memoirs of Billy Shears. And I stumbled upon it when I was on Amazon looking for some other books. And it popped up and said, hey, you might like this book. So I read the write-up, and I thought, okay, let me take a shot, let me take a look at it. And up to that point, I mean, I was aware of the Paul is Dead conspiracy, which I call the McCartney conspiracy, which later morphed into the Beatles conspiracy. But like many people, I thought it was a marketing ploy to bring more attention, to the Beatles, to sell more records and the such. And in fact, back in 1976, I think it was, when I was in high school, my high school was very progressive. It was on Long Island. And we were able to, the students were allowed to bring in guest speakers to present on various topics. And I actually asked the older brother of a good friend of mine, my friend's name was Adam, his brother's name was Doug. He was about 4 or 5 years older than I was, and he knew all the clues on the Beatle record. So I brought him in to do a whole Paul is Dead presentation to the high school, and I wasn't expecting a lot. I put pamphlets up around the school and all that stuff, and by the time we got started, it was standing room only. And Doug took everybody through the backmasking and the clues on the records and all that stuff. So, but even then, I just thought it was, a gimmicky, witty, clever marketing ploy. And it wasn't until I read Memoirs that I started to dig into the book. It's classified as historical fiction, and I started digging in. And as the more I dug, the more I found that the book, in an encoded way, was telling the truth. And so I'm 5 years into it now, and so I'm pretty sure biological Paul McCartney was replaced.
And who wrote this book?
The book is written by Thomas E.U. Harriott, Tom U. Harriott, and Tom is referred to as the encoder. And so the reason why he's the encoder is because the book has 3 layers. The first layer is you just read the book the way you would read any book. And then he has the word stacking. So each page of the book, there's 666 pages in the book, contains bolded letters. So when you read the bolded letters, what happens is now you're getting like a sequel or a deeper understanding of what the book is telling you. And then there's a third layer, which is extremely complex, and it's the acrostical code. And the acrostical goes vertical, up and down each page. And, there's each it's the first letter of every other sentence, beginning of the sentence, and then once you start writing out that code, you then get even a deeper view of what the book is telling the reader. And so I was one of those people that went through all three layers. Most people read the first, right, and then like, okay, that was interesting. Some people might venture in and read the word stacking, the bolded letters, but I would think very few get to the acrostical code because it can be quite cumbersome. But Tom did put a pamphlet out, a small book, which does give the acrostical code without somebody having to go in and write it out. But in any case, that book started in 2016 for me, and the more I got into it, the more I started to realize, as I was doing the research, that the book was truthful.
Okay, this is fascinating. I've never heard of this book. And if we were to read the acrostical code, I've never even heard that word before, okay?
Yeah.
This is getting way ahead of me here. Now, if we were to read that pamphlet, what would we read? What would we find in there?
Well, what you would read is that it gets into greater detail about Billy, the guy that's playing Paul McCartney. He tells us in the book that his name is William Shepard, but he goes by Billy Shears, and that's the name we're introduced to on the Sgt. Pepper album.
Right.
And so when we go into the acrostical, it gets into really the agenda of what the Beatles were really all about, what they were created to do, which was to social engineer and bring a new definition of society and the culture. In other words, to remove the old ways of doing things, which many people would call traditional values, which included religion like Christianity, and to move to a newer age, the age of Aquarius. And so the acrostical code helps to understand more of the, how should I say this, the esoteric aspects of what the Beatles were all about and what Billy is all about.
That's fascinating that you would bring this up. About a year ago, Bob Dylan's son did a documentary about Laurel Canyon. Are you familiar with it?
Oh, yeah.
Did you watch it?
I didn't watch that documentary, but I have the book.
Oh, okay, if you can get the documentary, it's great. And the book probably has his picture as well. Because at the Abbey Road Studios, they show the technicians and the engineers of the Abbey Road Studios, and these guys are wearing lab coats.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that this was created in a lab. There's all the Beatles and their songs and all this material. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, we can define it as social engineers.
Right.
People like Willis Harman, Theodore Adorno, people like that. Going back into the 1960s, it was really got started as far as the whole 60s movement. The precursor to it was the beat movement. And from the beat movement, it went into the 1960s and segued into the Beatles, which then went into the 70s, the 80s, and 90s, up through today. So all of the music today, the point I'm trying to make is it's all engineered ahead. So the lab coats in, showing the guys at EMI, that could very well be symbolic of what they were doing. They were engineering, they were orchestrating, they were manufacturing. And some people would look at that and they won't think twice about it. But once you get the backdrop, once you do more research on it, you start to look at pictures like that and you think to yourself, okay, hold on a second. I think there's more to that than a bunch of guys that decided to wear a lab coat for some pictures. So what there's been like a very incremental, methodical progression with music that started with the 50s. We got into the whole Elvis thing. Then it went to the Beatles and the British invasion. Then we got into the 1970s. And in the 70s, we also had Studio 54. So a lot of decadence began to be introduced into the society and into the culture. And then we got into the 1980s with a lot of the glam bands, bands like Poison and Motley Crue, and introducing more of the androgyny type of mindset, which actually goes back to David Bowie. Bowie was kind of the beginning of that, but it really picked up steam in the 1980s. And then we get into, the 90s, into 2000, we have grunge and punk and all that stuff. And then today, if we look at how music is being played out today, I mean, it's very ritualistic. Whenever you watch these shows they put on, these awards programs and all that stuff. So it really has, over the last 60 years, in my view, gotten darker and darker and more ritualistic.
Yeah, I actually had on the limo driver for, I think it was Poison or Motley Crue. One of them, it was called The Dirt or The Dirty. They wrote a book, and it was a film. Whichever band that was, yeah. And he talked about how they were involved in doing satanic rituals, blood sacrifice. And that's how they got hepatitis, was from blood, human blood and stuff. Yeah.
People don't really understand how dark the entertainment business is, and the music business is... There's a lot of dark aspects to it. There's no question about it. In the book, in the memoirs of Billy Shears, as you're talking about the ritual piece, it states that in February of 1963, both biological Paul McCartney and John Lennon entered into a satanic pact, a Faustian bargain. Billy refers to it as death for success. So in other words, they sell their soul for long-term notoriety, legacy, and fame and fortune while they're still here. And a lot of people have a very difficult time getting their heads around this. But if we take a look at all of the other artists that didn't make it to an older age, the whole 27 Club, as an example, is a good example of that. People just want to chalk that up as coincidence, but Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones. To this day, many people do not believe that Brian Jones drowned in a pool. I was watching one documentary where they said Brian was actually a very good swimmer. So there are people, especially one of his exes, that didn't believe that whole story about him drowning. Jimi Hendrix. We can go on and on. Kurt Cobain. When the cops showed up at the Cobain murder scene, the police said there was no way he could have shot himself. I mean, one of the cops said that because of where the gun was. And they said, the whole thing looked like it was staged and set up. So this ritualistic stuff that takes place is real. As hard as it is for people to get their heads wrapped around, there's so much of it when you really start digging into this whole music business and the entertainment industry, Hollywood included, that, you really do have to take a step back and pause for a moment.
You can have it all. Great pay, awesome benefits, a flexible schedule, the chance to grow. At Cox, we're recruiting auto and diesel technicians to join our Mannheim and Fleet Services teams. If you're ready for a new job and want to experience an award-winning workplace, drive your career forward with us. Visit cox.career/autotech to learn more. That's cox.career/autotech. When you work in tech at Cox, you get to do meaningful work every day. You get to be the biker who codes as fast as he rides, crafting advanced tech solutions that transform car buying, or a guitarist who develops harmonious apps and websites, connecting people to people and businesses, all in real time. A savvy soccer mom running solution sets as passionately as she runs gameplays. Be the super secret keeper, designing cybersecurity systems to protect private data and websites. A planet protector, expanding EV battery life and inventing more ways to build a better future for all. When you work in tech at Cox, you get to do career-defining work that solves the greatest problems of our time. Join us and connect to work that improves lives, including yours. Learn more about our family of businesses at cox.career/tech.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/audio.
And say, maybe there is something to all of this stuff.
I just happened to be in Hollywood, downtown Hollywood, the night of the Grammys when Whitney Houston died in that bathtub.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you something, man. I was living in Vegas at the time, so I'm used to, wild scenes in the streets. I have never seen anything like that night. I get fights everywhere, drunken people staggering around, just debauchery. There was something in the air that night that you could feel it, and that was triggering people to really to act out. So there is definitely something to that. Now, I got a question for you, and also too, back with the EMI too, I had another guest on the show who traced back those the record companies and to the defense contractors. Well, these companies were also a part of defense contracting vendors.
Absolutely.
So you're aware of that too? Okay, great. So then how do we know then? Okay, how do we know that even the whole Paul is dead or the Paul is replaced thing is in part of that psychological manipulation of us?
Meaning the theory that he's dead is a psyop?
Yeah.
Well, you never really know, right? That's the whole thing. What I've always said, Ed, is that the clues that are left on the albums, in magazine articles, in documentaries, and interviews, and all that stuff, I look at it as circumstantial evidence, right? So one thing by itself doesn't mean a whole lot. But once you start getting a litany of things and you start putting them together, you start to get a picture, right? The picture starts to come together. The thing is, there is a different guy playing the character of Paul McCartney, right? So going back about 5 years ago, I did these collages, and I was showing Paul McCartney through time, and it's very, very clear when you look at the collage and you see the different faces, there's a different guy. It's not the same guy. So the point I'm making is that the original guy, it's very obvious to me, having done the work and investigating it, the original guy is not there anymore. Now, some people might say, and you and I traded an email on this, but there are people that say, well, Mike, isn't it possible that the original Paul didn't die? That, he lived past 1966. Now, whether he's still alive today because he would be in his 70s, that's a different story. But did he live past 1966? And I've never discounted the possibility that that could be. The problem is that we don't see him. That's the problem that we have. Now, some people will say to me, well, he could be in like a witness protection program. And I'm like, well, that's a possibility. But the thing is, Ed, I haven't seen anything that resembles biological Paul since 1966. And so I had to conclude that if it's a psychological operation, which I believe it is, that was created by Tavistock up through the Committee of 300, that it's a lot easier and a lot cleaner to run something, a psychological operation of this magnitude, if the main protagonist that kicked it off is no longer around. It's just a whole lot easier to manage. It's cleaner. Dead men don't tell tales, right? So that's where I've landed with it. I really, and I have looked. I have one picture.
Yeah, on the boat.
Image.
Right, the one on the boat. There's a picture on a boat. Yeah.
There's a one on a boat. Yeah, and I discount the one on the far right because that really doesn't look like him when I looked at it. But there's a guy on the left that looks like a younger version of Paul McCartney, circa 1964, and then we had what appears to be Billy in the center. But again, we have these pictures, these images, and they're not close enough, even when you try to pull them in, to really make something out of it. And here's the other thing. They have manipulated and doctored the images and the photos, Ed, from day one. And this was done to obfuscate any type of research that anybody was looking into. It made it very, very difficult to be able to discern. And what I'm looking at is this authentic? Is this actually the guy, or did they screw around with this picture? Were they playing around with it, and so on? So, which means you have to just continue to look at hundreds and hundreds of images, which is something I have done over time. So the scene on the boat, even though at first glance it is kind of interesting, and you're like, okay, well, there does certainly appear to be at least two of them. I don't know. So I don't bank on just that one image, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I've looked at hundreds of these things, and I have come across no proof except one image I was going to say before, where it's a later picture, looks like around circa 1970s or so, where I thought, okay, that possibly could look like biological Paul with his hair longer and all that stuff. But then, again, I do know that they have doctored these photos like you wouldn't believe. I have found doctored photos, Ed, that actually after I point them out, you'll laugh. You can say, okay, look what they did there. Because the photoshopping back then, well, what we call photoshopping, the altering and the doctoring they did back then wasn't as clean and crisp as what can be done today. So you could pick up on certain things in the image itself that clearly points to the fact that the image was altered.
Yeah, I believe there's one photo where he's looking in the mirror, and the mirror has a mustache, and the guy looking into the mirror doesn't have a mustache. Is that correct? Or am I?
I'm trying to remember if I've seen that. Maybe I missed one.
I could be conflating something else. It's just a memory that I'm just going by.
Okay,
yeah. And it's interesting too, because you talk about how early Paul and Paul today. Out of all the Beatles, he's the only one that's kind of kept that kind of mop top kind of haircut, because it's the only thing consistent in all these years. Like the other guys have changed their hairs in current styles. You never see Paul with any different kind of hairstyle.
Yeah, that's because Billy continues to tie back to biological Paul. I mean, the story that's told in memoirs, Ed, is that it is very occulted, and there is esoteric linkages and connections, mysticism, and all that. And to net it out for your audience, Billy will tell us, and this is what he does tell us in memoirs, that through dreams and the such, that he is connected with biological Paul, who is now on the other side. Okay? Now, a lot of people are going to hear that and roll their eyes, but I'm just explaining how Billy explains this in the memoirs of Billy Shears. And as I did the work, the Beatles were immersed in the occult, Ed. Now, whether the Beatles themselves, as young lads, were aware of how they were being packaged, that's a whole other story. But when we go back, like we can go back to the Please Me album with the Beatles, with the one-eyed symbolism and so on, there's many images that I have collected over time which shows the Beatles with Masonic handshakes, one-eyed symbolism, the lion's paw, all of these different images and photos that depict occultism. And also mind control. That's the other thing. There are images of biological Paul and George Harrison with bird cages on their head. Mm-hmm. Now, the bird cage is Illuminati, MK Ultra mind control symbolism. I mean, this is something that Mike didn't make up. This is documented by people who do this type of research. So you have to ask yourself, why is it that Paul McCartney and George Harrison are being photographed with bird cages on their heads? I mean, I've done a lot of wacky things as a kid growing up, but putting a bird cage on my head was not one of those things, So that has led me to surmise that it's very possible that the Beatles from a very young age were in mind control programs. We take a look at Jane Asher's father was very much into the the world of psychiatry. He spent a lot of time at the Asher household. Paul had a room there.
She was in Alice in Wonderland, the play.
Yeah. So I mean, so this all this all gets very, very weird, very quickly, when you really start to dig in and get in under the covers, and under the hood. You start to ask start to get into a position, I should say, where you get to ask a lot of questions because it begs a lot of questions. So I've gotten very, very deep into it. And to be honest with you, my research is different than a lot of other Paul is Dead researchers. Mine has gone back to analyzing whether they even wrote their own music, all of their own music. I did a 4.5-hour presentation on that I released back last year, April 1st of 2020. And that caused a ruckus like you wouldn't believe within the Paul is Dead community because, in the Paul is Dead community, there's a lot of dogma, and there's a lot of people that practice. They're ideologues, right? They want to preserve the 1962 through 1966 period, which was biological Paul, and they want to believe that the Beatles were organic.
Right.
They want to believe that 4 Scousers, young lads from Liverpool, happened to run into a small record store owner who then got them signed to EMI under the tutelage of George Martin, and then that led to immense fame and fortune that continues on today, right? That story is myth. That story is fiction. That's not a true story. And as you know, that's what my research has told me. So these other groups, they want to still believe the Cinderella story because let's face it, it's a great story. I mean, it's a wonderful story to embrace. It's a happy story. It's a good, feel good story. But I believe the story to be mostly fiction. And so they don't want to go there. They'll want to talk about post 1966, and they'll want to focus on Billy. But talking about Paul McCartney and talking about the Beatles in a light other than the official narrative is heretical. So, and I've been called a Beatles heretic for that reason. And all I'm doing is I'm not trying to damage anybody's, reputation or any of that stuff. All I'm trying to do is look into what I think went on, doing the research, and then drawing some conclusions. And I always tell people that I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I'm really not. You can believe it or not believe it. I just enjoy presenting my research and presenting my findings and then letting my audience draw their own conclusions.
So you talked about this going on way before the Beatles were created. Have you, and the occult connection, have you ever noticed the resemblance of a young Paul McCartney and a young Aleister Crowley?
I have noticed it more as he got older, as Billy got older. I don't know. Here's the thing. A lot of those early photos, those images, as I said before, Ed, they've been altered and doctored. They have pictures showing a young Paul McCartney that is a hybrid composition of biological Paul and Billy. This has been done so many times. But as far as Billy looking like, or Paul McCartney, quote unquote Paul McCartney looking like Aleister Crowley, I see more of a resemblance as Billy got older. But I can't say that I've seen anything where he was younger that he looked like Crowley. Now, in the memoirs of Billy Shears, Billy tells us through Tom that he is bloodlined back to Crowley, that there is a bloodline relationship. Now, the question becomes whether Aleister Crowley was Billy Shears, Billy's biological father. That's something that we're looking into. And we have one person, I have one person that I know is a very good researcher. I'm trying to get them to come onto my show. They've done a lot of work on the connections from an ancestry perspective, taking Billy back, but I have yet to be able to get him to come on the show. I really wish he would do it so that we can see if we can get some questions answered.
Have you interviewed the author of the Memoirs of Billy Shears?
No. Back in 2016, I did email Tom, and I said, hey, Tom, would you like to come on the show and talk about the book? Initially, he said yes. And then about a week passed, and I followed up with him, and I said, whenever you're ready, let's come on, let's do a show, let's talk about it. And he said, Mike, I can't come on the show. I can't come on any shows. So in this whole process with the Memoirs of Billy Shears, there are all of these non-disclosures that have been signed, Ed, these secrecy agreements. And anybody who's worked in the corporate world in a capacity where there's new product and stuff like that will understand NDAs. So this is not something that was dreamt up. NDAs certainly exist. And so I couldn't get Tom to come on the show. And he had asked me if I wouldn't mind doing some of these to when I researched the book to do some of the shows on it. I said to him, if I plan on doing that, I said, of course I would do that, but I made it clear to him that I'm not towing anybody's line. So if the request is to paint a nice, pretty picture around this, I'm not going to do that. And I've never done that. People like to say that I favor Billy because I have gone back and taken apart the official Beatles narrative and took apart the Cinderella story. So their response to that is to attack. And, of course, their attacks are that's because I work for Billy, I'm working with Tom, and all this stuff. None of that stuff is true. That's just total nonsense. I don't work for anybody. Mike does his own thing. So, he couldn't come on the show. And so I've just, plowed ahead. And after last year, after April 1st, when I released my big presentation, the 4.5-hour deal on whether they wrote all their own music, I told my audience that I think I've hit the pinnacle of all this stuff. And, it doesn't get much more intense and controversial than getting into whether they wrote all their own music, because that's a big piece of the Beatle legacy of the worship and the idolizing, is that they were these geniuses, these brilliant songwriters, and all that stuff. And then Mike goes about dismantling that and saying, no, actually they were just four guys that were part of a psychological operation. They could play
When you work in tech at Cox, you get to do meaningful work every day. You get to be the biker who codes as fast as he rides, crafting advanced tech solutions that transform car buying, or a guitarist who develops harmonious apps and websites, connecting people to people and businesses, all in real time. A savvy soccer mom running solution sets as passionately as she runs gameplays. Be the super secret keeper, designing cybersecurity systems to protect private data and websites. A planet protector, expanding EV battery life and inventing more ways to build a better future for all. When you work in tech at Cox, you get to do career-defining work that solves the greatest problems of our time. Join us and connect to work that improves lives, including yours. Learn more about our family of businesses at cox.career/tech.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/audio.
their instruments, yes, they can, but they didn't write all their own music. The music was written by outside professional songwriters. And actually, in my presentation, I make a case, and I think a very good case, that they didn't even play their instruments on Rubber Soul. And I don't believe they played their instruments on any of the first 7 albums. That was the early period, 62 to 66. Please Please Me through their album Revolver, which was released in August of 1966, I think it was. So, once you get to that point, and you lay out what you believe are the facts and the evidence, and like I said, all of it is circumstantial. We don't have any direct evidence. You can build a pretty good case, and I thought I did, and that really irritated a lot of people. In fact, I had a conversation with somebody that is connected into the Beatles machine. I can't say who this person is. All I can say is that they did studio work. They told me for John Lennon, and that Billy played bass on this person's album back in the 1970s. I have proof that Billy indeed did play on this person's album. And he said to me, Mike, there are people that don't want this information out. And I said, I understand that. I said, but I'm going to put it out. And, maybe in an earlier time, Ed, it would have been a big problem, in the 60s, the 70s, maybe even the 80s. But the fact that Memoirs has come out and Billy is clearly behind the book, I wasn't very concerned about repercussions. I felt, look, if the main protagonist, the main guy who's playing the part, has sanctioned a book called his unofficial memoir, then I can proceed. And I have. And in fact, there's a new website out now. I'm not plugging a website, by the way. The only reason why I'm mentioning this for the audience is because what Billy has been doing since 2009, he has been converging to the end point, which means disclosure. So he has been incrementally disclosing that he is not Paul McCartney. So a new website went up called memoirsofpaul.com. And when you go to that website, and I did a video on it, there's 2 videos I did recently that talk about this website. We have the actual co-marketing, the promoting of both Billy's new book called The Lyrics, 1956 to the present, and the Memoirs of Billy Shears together. 2 box sets being promoted and marketed together. And the narrative and the language around the lyrics on that website, it's very, very clear. If you approach that website objectively, with a critical mind, I don't think there's any way you can walk away and say, yeah, it's always been the same guy playing the part. I don't think you can walk away saying that. It's interesting. They even have photos, images laid up showing clear differences, facial features between biological Paul and Billy on the webpage that is promoting Billy's new official book, The Lyrics. So we have this dichotomy going on. On one hand, we're told, here's the official memoirs called The Lyrics, but the words contradict what the content of the lyrics will tell you. There's a conflict. The lyrics is telling you I've always been Paul McCartney, and the words and the pictures around the selling of the book on the website is saying, no, he's not. And the fact that it's been married to the Memoirs of Billy Shears, the unofficial memoir, makes it even more significant.
That's it. I'm going to have to check that out. I was totally unaware of that. I'm going to have to check that out.
Take a look, Ed. I'm telling you, when you take a look, you're going to be, all right, okay.
This is a good time to take a commercial break. We're talking to Mike Williams, and you can check him out at sageofquay.com. And I did go there, by the way. He told me to go there. Everything's on there. Twitter, like every link in the world is on there. What does Sage of Quay mean?
It's I get asked that a lot. Quay is a part of a name of a town that I live in.
Okay.
And then when I was first getting into conspiracy stuff, my family used to poke at me, right? And I would talk to them about different conspiracies, not the McCartney thing, but it was, 9/11, all that stuff. And they started saying, oh, it's the Sage, But they were doing it kind of in a fun way, just kind of ribbing me. So I stuck them both together. And I wasn't even sure at the time that I even liked it, but it stuck. So I'm stuck with Sage of Quay now.
Sageofquay.com. We're talking with Mike Williams after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors.
Before Epstein was the Franklin cover-up. Before that, the Finders. And long before that, the Cleveland Street Scandal. Pedogate Primer is a concise intro and overview of a growing child abuse epidemic worldwide. It features shocking instances of institutionalized and organizational pedophilia throughout history. Churches, cults, the world of arts and entertainment, the government, NGOs, charities, and major corporations are all complicit or culprits in many instances. Pedogate Primer delves into material that for many may seem like the stuff of conspiracy theories. For this reason, the book draws on academic resources, declassified documents, and other reliable sources, and steers clear of conjecture. Such shocking true stories need no embellishment.
If you find yourself in need of legal representation, it can be a very stressful time in your life. In my career, I have dealt with thousands of lawyers, I've dealt with thousands of law firms, and I can confidently recommend to you Keith M. Davidson at kmdlaw.com. Available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Just log into kmdlaw.com. That's kmdlaw.com. Or you can call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. That's 833-4KMD-LAW. Personal injury, wrongful death, STDs, sexual assault, car accidents. They handle it all efficiently and professionally. It doesn't matter how imposing the opposition may be, because the team at kmdlaw.com are battle-tested and fierce. They will not stop until justice prevails. Go to kmdlaw.com or call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. If you're in for the fight of your life, stop screwing around and contact KMD Law. The Opperman Report is brought to you by Aquadam.net. You can give them a call at 707-764-2119. A flooded home is never easy to deal with. You're left with the mess to clean up, the insurance companies to deal with, and not to mention all the memories, the precious memories that are lost in the flood. You can never replace those. And Aquadam can be a tool in your arsenal to protect your home and property from the floodwaters. The cofferdam is filled with water to control water and is reusable as long as it's taken care of. It can protect your home or business from rising floodwaters like a dam, but without the beavers. It can also be used in construction. If you need an area to be dewatered, an Aquadam can do the job. An Aquadam was used at SeaWorld in Orlando for the Mako roller coaster ride during the coaster's construction by dewatering the work area. An Aquadam is now dewatering the work area at San Antonio SeaWorld for their newest roller coaster ride. An Aquadam has been used in many construction projects all around the U.S. and all around the world. Now give Aquadam a call, 707-764-2119. You can look them up online at aquadam.net. You can find them on Facebook at Aquadam Inc. You call them up, you email them, you tell them Ed Opperman sent you, and they're going to take 10% off the price. Aquadam.net, 707-764-2119. Thank you so much for listening to the Opperman Report. I want to welcome all our new listeners at WWPR 1490 AM in the Tampa Bay area. We're brand new down here. We're getting a nice warm welcome. We have great advertising opportunities for local sponsors, local businesses, but also international websites and international companies too on our other stations in California, Nevada, Utah, and on the internet worldwide. But down here in Tampa Bay, Florida, we have some great opportunities for you to come in and get very, very affordable advertising rates. Get a hold of me at oppermanreport@gmail.com and we'll cut you a good deal. Emailrevealer.com. People ask me all the time, hey Ed, are you still a private investigator? I sure am. Go to emailrevealer.com. We handle adoption investigations, infidelity investigations, where you give us your spouse's email address. We trace it back to online dating websites, catch them cheating online. Email tracing, locate or identify somebody from as little as an anonymous email address. Someone owe you money? Back child support? We can find that deadbeat. Locate his hidden assets. Locate his hidden bank accounts. Find his current place of employment and even assist you in obtaining a judgment and recover that judgment for you. Emailrevealer.com. Digital forensics, computer forensics, cell phone forensics, recover deleted text messages. Create a report that you can use in court. Emailrevealer.com, 800-572-9762.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. Hey, by the way, too, you can follow us on Twitter at Opperman Report on Twitter, too. I put up a lot of content on there as well. We're talking today with the founder of SageofQuay.com, Mike Williams, who appears to be an expert on Paul is Dead theory. Very impressive content here, Mr. Williams. Now, you talk about a lot of stuff, okay? The influence of Crowley, okay? I've seen that. I mentioned Jane Asher before, right? And You're familiar with her brother, Paul Asher, and his connection to the Indica Art Gallery?
Yes.
Right, and that's where Yoko and John met, the Indica Art Gallery. What do you know about the Process Church of the Final Judgment and their influence in all this mishigash?
Well, I haven't dug a lot into the Process Church, Ed, but I'm trying to recall, what I do know of it. It was all part of that. How do I say this? It was all part of that. That occult aspect that was very prominent which actually I would say began to pick up prominence back in the 1960s, and there were, now you tell me, there were people like celebrities that were attached to the Process Church, right?
Yeah, Studio 54 too.
Studio 54, right. So it was this whole, how do I say this without getting people like, really thrown for a loop here? My take on it was a lot of that satanic kind of like undertow with the Process Church. That's my take on it. I don't know if you have a different opinion.
I think there's, you hear about John Lennon talking about his lost weekend, right? And he talks about how winding up at Doris Day's house in the middle of the night. That's right there. Who was the son? I forget his name off the top of my head. Terry Melcher. Terry Melcher, son of Sam. Well, that whole bunch, man. Papa John Phillips. That whole bunch were up to their neck in all that stuff. Even Paul himself, or whoever you want to call him, he believes in magic with a K. So right. They were all. It was hanging out with William S. Burroughs. Just a fascinating time, fascinating crowd, and it just seems to be had their hands in everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I pause sometimes when I get into the whole Satanism piece, Ed, because so many people really don't want to hear it. They don't understand it, and it just kind of it shuts the light switch off. So, but that's my take with the Process Church. And like you said, they were all into magic, into mysticism, occultism. Magic with a K is Aleister Crowley. Crowley is very, very prominent, far more prominent than people think, Yeah.
Yeah, Yoko into hypnotism and all kind of witchcraft and all kind of weird stuff, man.
Yeah, Yoko in the interview with David Sheff in the Playboy interview in 1980, I think it was that interview where she said that, she collects Egyptian artifacts because they have magical powers. Right? And Yoko admits to the fact that she's a witch.
Yeah. And was related to Emperor Hirohito. She was like went to exclusive boarding schools. At one, she was the only female at the school.
Yeah, and when May Pang, when the relationship ended with May Pang, between she and John, she had made a comment, if I remember correctly, about the fact that when she ran into John afterwards, it was like he went under some kind of hypnosis, that it was some kind of programming that kind of just put him back to where they needed him to be.
Yeah, he was hypnotized the last time he went over to see Yoko Ono. He left her to go there for a meeting or something like that, or to quit smoking or something. I forget what it was, man. And she hypnotized him, man. And he says, she says I can come back. I had May Pang on the show. People can check that out. If you go to Spreaker, Opperman Spreaker, May Pang. The 2 hours with her, and she said at one point too, we talked about this off the air or the email. She said, I asked her about Paul is dead. I said, what about those folks that say Paul is dead? And she said, oh no, he's not dead because I met both of them. Okay,
yeah.
Did you catch that? Did you get around to listening to that?
No, I hadn't caught that, but you did write it in your email. You mentioned it in the email. But the thing with May Pang, and I'm not knocking May, but her history as far as her progression through the pipeline, working for Abco Records,
right.
It was Alan Klein's management office, then winding up working for John and Yoko I think she was a personal assistant, and then Yoko suggesting to her that she should be John's partner or hang out with John as he went out to L.A., right? That whole stint that he did out there, and then coming back for the hypnosis session. That whole line of events is very odd. And to be honest with you, like I said, with all due respect to May and anybody else, those people who are in the machine like that, I take a step back and I pause. I don't take it at face value because I do believe that they are sworn to secrecy on this thing. I believe that. And I don't really believe they're going to come clean until it's time to come clean. And I think the person who's calling the shots on that is Billy himself.
It's interesting you talk about the secrecy and all this. I had booked Fred Seaman, okay, who, in fact, I have his phone number right in front of me right now. I'm just staring at it. Back in the 10-1-20. I had booked him. And a week later, he was contacted by Yoko's lawyers, telling him he wasn't allowed to come on the show and keep his mouth shut.
She sued him again.
Yeah,
right?
Right after my email to him.
I know a person who knows Fred, and they said, hey, we're going to try to get him to come on your show, Mike. Yeah. And I was told that Fred said no, he wouldn't do it. That he thought the whole McCartney conspiracy was a bunch of hogwash. It was.
When you work in tech at Cox, you get to do meaningful work every day. You get to be the biker who codes as fast as he rides, crafting advanced tech solutions that transform car buying, or a guitarist who develops harmonious apps and websites, connecting people to people and businesses, all in real time. A savvy soccer mom running solution sets as passionately as she runs gameplays. Be the super secret keeper, designing cybersecurity systems to protect private data and websites. A planet protector, expanding EV battery life and inventing more ways to build a better future for all. When you work in tech at Cox, you get to do career-defining work that solves the greatest problems of our time. Join us and connect to work that improves lives, including yours. Learn more about our family of businesses at cox.career/tech.
True. So that's what I was told by a friend of mine that knew him. So I don't know. I don't know whether it's because of that or look. He had a lot of pressure put on him. I mean, Yoko. This is the second, I think, lawsuit that he's been through with her.
I think he actually went to jail.
Did he go to jail the first time?
I think the first time, yeah, he was accused of stealing material, and he went to jail.
Photos and stuff that was in the office or something, if I recall what I read. Yeah.
Well, we've only got about 4 minutes left. I told you the second half was going to fly by. It's just, I definitely want to have you come back. But in the next 4 minutes, because you're a great storyteller, you're a great narrator, what would you like to leave us with? Convince us.
Well, what I want to leave everybody with, Ed, is all the world is a stage. And deception is all around us. And I have a saying, I said this on a show with Ole Damagard years ago, that anything worth knowing is a lie. If it's worth knowing, trust me, they're lying to us. And so, all of these stories that have been told to us, they're stories. And it's not until we dig in that we're going to get the truth. And as I mentioned in my last video, I would rather know the truth than live with the lie. And I was a big Beatle freak, Ed. They were the whole basis of me becoming a musician, guitar player, recording, writing music, and all this stuff. So I didn't have any axe to grind with the Beatles, and it was a very, very hard pill for me to swallow to do this research and come to the realization that I was deceived almost all of my life. So that's what I want to leave people with is before you jump on something and say that can't be true, take the time, research it, do your own research, and decide for yourself.
Yeah, there's so much here, that we know is true. Like the whole Heather Mills thing, with the being one of Adnan Khashoggi's escorts, and somehow she winds up with Paul. It's just way too much stuff going on here. Assassinations, several attempts, and real live assassinations. And the other guy too that got shot by the RFK investigator, waving a BB gun on his. There's just way too much craziness going on here in every degree, every direction with this bunch. Let me ask you a question, real quick, because we only have a couple of minutes. But Dave McGowan, okay, you seem to be a guy that would appreciate Dave McGowan's work. Do you? Yes,
I have his book. Yep, Strange Scenes. Yeah.
Yeah, and so what do you make though? Because he was rabidly anti Paul is dead. He would just go on the warpath if you mention that to him. What do you say to that?
What I found, Ed, what I say to that is that even some of the best researchers, they have areas that they won't go. They won't go.
That's so true.
It's a sacred cow. So, you have people that will investigate something and they will do just unbelievable work. But then if you say, well, what about this? Like, that can't be, that's ridiculous, So what I found funny, with McGowan, with Dave, who's not with us anymore, I mean, fabulous work, but I don't know how you can look at Laurel Canyon and come to the conclusions that Dave came to, and then turn around and say, oh, the whole Paul is dead thing is a bunch of malarkey. No, actually, it's right in line with what was taking place at Laurel Canyon.
Exactly, right, which always baffled me too. But his whole thing was, no way, I'm a guitarist, and there's no way that you could copy this guitar skills. And but you're saying that, hey, they didn't even play the guitars.
No, I hear that all the time, Ed. People say to me, I'm a guitar player, Mike, I know. I said, no, you don't know. The guitar playing that you think you know was played by Vic Flick, who was a great studio musician who, that's who I believe, played on many Beatle records during the 62 through 66 period. He was in the George Martin Orchestra. So when people say, oh, no, it's great guitar playing on Norwegian Wood or that bass line or the drums. I mean, Bernard Purdie came out in the 1970s and to this day says that he drummed on 21 Beatles songs on the early albums. Bernard Purdie said he drummed on them. Purdie is in the Rock and Roll Drummers Hall of Fame, and he was with Aretha Franklin for 25 years. So are we going to say Bernard's a liar? The official story tells us that Andy White drummed on P.S. I Love You and Love Me Do. What's to keep us from saying that maybe Andy drummed on more than two of those songs? And I was contacted by a family member of the great studio musician, drummer, Ronnie Verrill. And this person wrote me and said, Ronnie drummed on Beatles songs as well.
Mike Williams, we got to have you come back. The website is called Sage of Quay. You go there and you can find links to his YouTube, to his podcast, to his Patreon. I didn't mention his Patreon before, but it's a Sage of Quay Patreon too as well. You can go there and support his work. I'm sure there's some exclusive content on there. Sage of Quay, Mike Williams, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed.
Good night. And now a word from our sponsors. EmailRevealer.com. People ask me all the time, hey, Ed, are you still a private investigator? I sure am. Go to emailrevealer.com. We handle adoption investigations, infidelity investigations, where you give us your spouse's email address. We trace it back to online dating websites, catch them cheating online, email tracing, locate or identify somebody from as little as an anonymous email address. Someone owe you money? Back child support? We can find that deadbeat, locate his hidden assets, locate his hidden bank accounts, find his current place of employment, and even assist you in obtaining a judgment and recover that judgment for you. EmailRevealer.com. Digital forensics, computer forensics, cell phone forensics, recover deleted text messages. Create a report that you can use in court. EmailRevealer.com. 800-572-9762. The Opperman Report is brought to you by Aquadam.net. You can give them a call at 707-764-2119. A flooded home is never easy to deal with. You're left with the mess to clean up, the insurance companies to deal with, and not to mention all the memories, the precious memories that are lost in the flood. You can never replace those. And Aquadam can be a tool in your arsenal to protect your home and property from the floodwaters. The cofferdam is filled with water to control water and is reusable as long as it's taken care of. It can protect your home or business from rising floodwaters like a dam, but without the beavers. It can also be used in construction. If you need an area to be dewatered, an Aquadam can do the job. An Aquadam was used at SeaWorld in Orlando for the Mako roller coaster ride during the coaster's construction by dewatering the work area. An Aquadam is now dewatering the work area at San Antonio SeaWorld for their newest roller coaster ride. An Aquadam has been used in many construction projects all around the U.S. and all around the world. Now give Aquadam a call, 707-764-2119. You can look them up online at aquadam.net. You can find them on Facebook at Aquadam Inc. You call them up, you email them, you tell them Ed Opperman sent you, and they're going to take 10% off the price. Aquadam.net, 707-764-2119. If you find yourself in need of legal representation, it can be a very stressful time in your life. In my career, I have dealt with thousands of lawyers, I've dealt with thousands of law firms, and I can confidently recommend to you Keith M. Davidson at kmdlaw.com. Available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Just log into kmdlaw.com. That's kmdlaw.com. Or you can call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. That's 833-4KMD-LAW. Personal injury, wrongful death, STDs, sexual assault, car accidents. They handle it all efficiently and professionally. It doesn't matter how imposing the opposition may be, because the team at kmdlaw.com are battle-tested and fierce. They will not stop until justice prevails. Go to kmdlaw.com or call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. If you're in for the fight of your life, stop screwing around and contact KMD Law.
Before Epstein was the Franklin cover-up. Before that, the Finders. And long before that, The Cleveland Street Scandal. Pedogate Primer is a concise intro and overview of a growing child abuse epidemic worldwide. It features shocking instances of institutionalized and organizational pedophilia throughout history. Churches, cults, the world of arts and entertainment, the government, NGOs, charities, and major corporations are all complicit or culprits in many instances. Pedogate Primer delves into material that for many may seem like the stuff of conspiracy theories. For this reason, the book draws on academic resources, declassified documents, and other reliable sources, and steers clear of conjecture. Such shocking true stories need no embellishment.
Hey, if you have something you want to promote, like a business or a website, you got a big event coming up, consider advertising on the Opperman Report. We have excellent advertising rates for you. We're on KCAA on 3 different frequencies on AM/FM in California, KSHP 1400 AM in Nevada, WWPR in Florida, the Tampa Bay area, 1490 AM, and also WWNN, which is on the east coast of Florida, all the way from Miami up to Port Bay, with 175 miles of I-95. The advertising rates are very affordable. Once your ad goes up and we play the show on the podcast and on the YouTube channel, those ads stay up there forever. And then we play repeats every single night of classic Opperman Report shows. And your new ads will be inserted into those repeats that play every single night. So the saturation is incredible, and the rates are very affordable. Contact me at oppermanreport@gmail.com.